Jedediah Stone pulled his horse, Bess, to a halt on the low ridge overlooking his homestead. Every line of his body ached, a deep, bone-weary complaint from 12 hours spent mending the barbed wire on the South Range fence line. He was a man, carved from the prairie itself, fall sun-scorched leather, hard angles, and quiet endurance. He craved a cup of scalding hot, bitter coffee, and the familiar creak of his porch chair. But the homestead was wrong. It wasn't one thing he could name. It was an accumulation of small, sharp details that pricked at the edges of his unease. The horses, his 3 geldings, usually waiting by the trough for their evening oats, were huddled near the far corner of the corral, their heads up, ears pinned back, staring at the barn. The chickens were silent, not scratching and clucking in the yard, and the kitchen door, which Eliza always kept propped open with a fieldstone to let the evening breeze clear out the cooking smoke, was shut tight. A cold dread, sharper than the evening chill, settled in his gut. He nudged Bess forward, not into a gallop, but a quiet, watchful walk. His hand, calloused and scarred, fell instinctively to the worn wooden stock of the rifle in his saddle scabbard. He rounded the corner of the small, sod-walled house, and his heart seized, squeezed into a tight, breathless knot. She was there, under the ancient, sprawling cottonwood that dominated the yard. She sat, Elisa, his daughter, his only blood, only kin, the one soft thing in his harsh, uncompromising world. She was leaning against the trunk, her legs splayed out in the dirt. Her simple canvas trousers and linen shirt were torn, and she was covered, caked, in blood. It was everywhere. It matted her dark hair, painted grotesque stripes down her face, and soaked the front of her shirt in a terrible, dark blossom. Her feet were bare, caked in mud and something darker. Jed swung down from Bess before the horse had even fully stopped. His boots made no sound in the soft dust. He moved with a predator's stillness, his eyes scanning, assessing. The dread was a living thing now, coiling in his throat. He saw the open, splintered barn door. He saw a dark shape slumped by the water trough, a shape that resolved itself into a man's boot, a sprawled leg. He didn't go to the body. He went to her. He approached slowly, as one might approach a spooked mare. He stopped a few feet away, his shadow falling over her. She didn't look up. Her gaze was fixed on the far horizon, where the sky was bleeding purple and orange. He crouched, his knees cracking in protest. He saw her face. The blood was smeared, but beneath it, her skin was pale, waxy. Her lip was split, but her eyes weren't vacant with shock. They weren't wild with terror. They were flat, cold, as ancient and empty as the prairie sky itself. "Eliza," he said. His voice, usually a low rumble, came out as a dry croak. She flinched, a small, bird-like movement. Her head turned, slowly, painfully. She blinked, as if seeing him for the first time, as if waking from a long, dark dream. The world swam back into focus for Eliza, the ringing in her ears. A high, thin whine that had been her only companion for how long? Receded, replaced by the buzz of a late-season fly and the rough sound of her father's voice. The bark of the cottonwood was a rough, steady pressure against her spine. Every muscle in her body was a symphony of agony. Her ribs screamed with every shallow breath. Her forearm throbbed with a wet, tearing pain. But stronger than the pain was the smell. The coppery, metallic reek of slaughter. It was on her hands, in her mouth, in her nose. It was the only air left to breathe. "Pa," she whispered. Her throat felt raw, as if she'd been screaming. Maybe she had. "Are you hit?" Jet's voice was tight, strained over the fear. He was looking for the source of the blood, the fatal wound, the place he would have to press his bandana to. Praying it was enough. She followed his gaze down her own body. "Some," she said, her voice still a pale imitation of itself. "Not all." She paused, and her eyes drifted back to the horizon. "Not most." Jet's gaze sharpened. He looked from his daughter so still, so terribly stained to the boot by the trough. Who? Red scorpions, she said. The name was ash on her tongue. Jed's blood ran cold. Silas Scar McCann and his crew, vultures, rustlers, and cutthroats who'd been plaguing the territory for a year. Jed had crossed them 2 seasons prior, refusing to sell them steers he knew were destined to be rebranded and sold to the army. McCann hadn't taken the refusal. Well, a man who ain't with us is against us. Stone, he'd snarled. Jed had shown him the broadside of his shotgun and told him to clear his land. He'd known, deep down, that the debt would one day come due. How many? He asked, his voice hardening, the fear being burned away by a rising, righteous rage. 4, Eliza said. She lifted a hand, slowly, a trembling, bloody talon. They came an hour past, rode in hard, said they were looking for you, said you owed them. Flashback, the thunder of hooves. She'd been in the kitchen, kneading dough for supper. The sound was wrong too fast, too many. She'd wiped her floured hands on her apron and stepped to the door, her heart already starting a frantic rhythm against her ribs. For men, pulling their horses to a rearing stop that tore up the yard. She didn't know the names, but she knew the reputation. She'd seen the leader, McCann, in town once. A livid scar cleaved his face from eyebrow to jaw, pulling one side of his mouth into a permanent, sneering grin. Well, looky here, McCann had drawled, his eyes crawling over her. The old man ain't home, just the pretty little bird. He's on the South Range, Eliza said, her voice steady, belying the tremor in her hands. He'll be back by dark. You can wait on the porch. Oh, we'll wait. Another man, greasy and gap-toothed, had laughed, but not on the porch. They'd swung down, fanning out. They weren't here to talk. Where's he keep his safe, girl? McCann snapped, advancing on her. We've come to collect the toll. We don't have a safe, she said, backing into the kitchen. Just flour and beans. You're welcome to either. The greasy one, his name was Cale, grabbed her arm. Don't play coy. His grip was steel. His smell was sour, whiskey and unwashed flesh. That was when it started. The flour, the skillet, the knife. Back in the present, Jed saw the story in the wreckage. He stood, his joints popping. Stay, he commanded, a needless order. She looked as if she'd been rooted to the tree. He walked to the water trough. Cale, he was face down in the dirt, his back a dark, sticky mess. Jed nudged him with his boot. The man was heavy, limp, dead. Jed saw the hilt of Eliza's largest kitchen knife, the one she used for butchering chickens, protruding from between the man's shoulder blades. He'd been stabbed with ferocious, desperate force. Jed's eyes scanned the yard. He followed a trail of scuffed dirt and dark droplets toward the corral. There was the second one, younger. He was draped over the lowest rail of the fence, as if he'd been trying to climb it. Jed didn't have to look close to see the cause. The center of his chest was a raw red crater, buckshot, close range. Jed looked back at the house. The shotgun, his old double barrel, was missing from its pegs by the door. 2, Eliza had said 4. His gaze snapped to the barn. The door was ajar, hanging crooked on one hinge. A deep, primal instinct told him that was where the heart of the violence had unfolded. He drew his rifle from the scabbard. The weight was familiar, comforting. He moved toward the barn, his steps silent. He smelled it before he saw it, the thick, cloying miasma of shed blood, hay, and manure. He pushed the door open with the barrel of his rifle. The last light of dusk slanted through the gaps in the boards, illuminating a hellish tableau. The third man, a wiry fellow with a cavalry saber on his belt, was slumped near the forge. The heavy branding iron, the one with the S4 stone, was buried in his skull. Eliza's doing, the sheer brutal strength it must have taken, made Jed's stomach clench. And then he saw him, Silas Scar McCann. He was propped against a pile of hay bales in the back stall. His legs were twisted at an unnatural angle. He was alive, barely. His chest was a ruin, punctured and torn. The prongs of Eliza's hay pitchfork were still embedded in him, pinning him to the hay like a gruesome insect. He gurgled, a wet, rattling sound. His one good I found, Jed. A flicker of recognition, of hatred, of fear. Jed leveled his rifle, his finger resting on the trigger. He looked at the man who had come to destroy his life, to violate his home, to harm his daughter. He saw the pain in McCann's eye, and he felt nothing. No, not nothing. A cold, bleak satisfaction. He didn't shoot. He watched. He let the man's last sight be the impassive face of the man he'd tried to wrong. A voice, stronger now, cut through the twilight from the yard. There was 4 people. Jed turned his head, looking back at the silhouette of his daughter under the tree. One got to his horse. Eliza's voice carried, clear and hard as iron. The young one. He just watched. When McCann went down, he ran, rode east, fast. Jed looked back at McCann. The man's eye had glazed over. The gurgling had stopped. 3 dead. 1 fled. Jedediah Stone lowered his rifle. The rage was gone, replaced by a vast, cold clarity. This wasn't an ending. This was a beginning. The pup who ran would bring the rest of the pack. He stepped out of the barn, back into the cooling air, the scent of blood and dust. He walked back to his daughter, who hadn't moved. The crimson twilight had swallowed the prairie, and the first stars were piercing the deep, velvet black. He crouched in front of her again. He looked at her. Truly looked here. Jedediah Stone didn't waste time on the dead. They were carrion now, a feast for the coyotes and the vultures. They didn't matter. The one who lived, he mattered. The man riding east was a loose thread that could unravel everything. Inside, Jed said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He holstered his rifle and reached down. His hands, rough as cured leather, were surprisingly gentle as he hooked one arm under Eliza's. Up, girl, we can't stay here. Eliza cried out, a sharp, strangled sound, as he pulled her to her feet. The world tilted, a dizzying swirl of dark earth and pinprick stars. Her legs, numb and cold for so long, felt like glass, ready to shatter. The pain in her ribs exploded, a white-hot nova that stole her breath. She would have collapsed if not for his iron grip. I know, he grunted, taking her weight. I know it hurts. It's supposed to. He half-carried, half-dragged her across the yard, past the dark shape by the trough, and into the house. The kitchen was a disaster zone. The heavy oak table was overturned. The floor was a treacherous landscape of broken crockery, scattered flour, and dark, unsettling stains. Jed kicked the door shut. The sound was unnaturally loud, a final, hollow boom that sealed them inside. He guided her to the one chair that remained upright and eased her down. For a moment, they just existed in the wreckage. The silence of the house was profound, a heavy blanket smothering the echoes of the violence. Jed struck a match, the scrape and flare blindingly bright. He lit the kerosene lamp on the mantel, and the small room was filled with a warm yellow light that made the chaos seem even more grotesque. Without a word, he went to the pump by the sink, found a tin basin that wasn't cracked, and pumped it full of cold, clear well water. He ripped a strip from a linen tablecloth that was already half torn from the table. He knelt before her. "This'll sting," he warned. He dipped the cloth and began, with a rough tenderness, to wash the blood from her face. She flinched as he touched the split in her lip, but she didn't pull away. He worked with a grim, practiced efficiency, his movements economical. He cleaned the grime from her cheeks, her forehead, her throat. With every wipe, more of his daughter emerged from the crimson mask. His eyes fell on her arm. "What's this?" The sleeve was torn, and beneath it, the flesh of her forearm was mangled. It wasn't a cut, it was a bite, human. Eliza's voice was dull. "Cale, the greasy one, by the trough. He grabbed me. I had the skillet. I hit him, but he wouldn't let go. He bit me, like an animal. Jed's jaw muscle jumped, a single, violent twitch. He said nothing, but his washing became rougher, scrubbing at the wound until fresh blood welled. He poured a generous splash of corn whiskey from his flask directly into the bite. This time, Eliza screamed. It was a raw, thin sound that tore from her throat. She arched back in the chair, her hands gripping the seat until her knuckles were white. "Better it hurts now," Jed said, his voice flat, then rots later. He found a needle and thread in her sewing basket and, with the same impersonal focus, stitched the deepest gashes in the wound closed. He didn't offer her a stick to bite down on. She didn't ask for one. He bound the arm tightly with another strip of cloth. "Ribs," he said. "It wasn't a question, I think McCann broke one when in the barn. He hit me with the butt of his pistol." Jed nodded. He felt her side, his fingers probing. She hissed, but didn't move. "Cracked," he diagnosed. "Maybe two. Nothing to do but bind M." He wrapped her torso, pulling the linen so tight she could barely breathe. "It'll hold you," he said. He finished his work and stood, looking at her. She was clean, patched, bound. She was still pale, trembling with shock and exhaustion, but the fire was back in her eyes. It was a low, dangerous glow in the deep, dark pools of her pupils. "Tell me," he ordered, and she did. She told him everything, her voice starting as a halting whisper but gaining strength as the memories flooded back. She told him about Cale's sour breath, the sickening thud of the skillet against his head. She told him about grabbing the kitchen knife, a familiar weight, and the unfamiliar, horrific feeling of plunging it into a man's back, the way his body went stiff, then heavy. She told him about the second one, the young one, chasing her, his laughter high and nervous, how she doubled back to the house, grabbed the shotgun, and waited by the door. How he'd burst in, and she hadn't hesitated, pulling both triggers at once. The recoil had slammed her into the wall, bruising her shoulder, but the man had evaporated in a red mist. She told him about the barn, the wiry one with the saber who'd cornered her, how she'd dodged his wild, untrained swings and grabbed the only weapon she could find, the heavy branding iron. He'd lunged, and she'd swung it like a club, a desperate, two-handed heave that connected with a sound like a melon splitting. And McCann. He'd found her there, breathing hard, leaning over the dead man. He hadn't laughed then. He'd drawn his pistol. He was smart. He'd stalked her, keeping his distance. He'd hit her, sending her sprawling into the hay. He'd stood over her, his scarred face a mask of contempt. He said he'd kill me slow, Pa, she whispered, the memory bringing a fresh tremor. He said he'd make me pay for his men. He holstered his pistol and he unbuckled his belt. Jed closed his eyes. A single ragged breath escaped him. "That's when I saw it," Eliza continued, her voice hardening. "The pitchfork. It was just there, leaning against the stall. I rolled hard and grabbed it." He was surprised. He was fumbling with his trousers. "I screamed. I think I screamed, and I just ran at him. I put all my weight into it." She looked down at her hands, still red-stained around the nails. "It went in so easy, so soft." He made a sound, like a kettle boiling over, and he fell back. The fourth one, the one who ran. He was just a boy, Pa, younger than me. He just stood in the doorway, his eyes wide. When McCann fell, he just turned and ran. He didn't even draw his gun. Jed let the silence stretch, letting her words hang in the lamplit kitchen. He absorbed the full measure of her horror, her strength, her survival. He felt a terrible, aching pride swell in his chest, so fierce it almost choked him. He had raised a daughter of the prairie, but in doing so, he had exposed her to its savagery. "You did what you had to," he said finally. "You survived. That's the only rule that matters out here." He turned from her and began to move through the kitchen with a new, grim purpose. He found a canvas sack. He emptied a tin of coffee into it. He added a slab of bacon, a bag of dried beans, and all the jerky from the smokehouse tin. He went to his own room, returning with 4 boxes of .44240 cartridges and one of .30230. He stuffed them into the sack. "What are you doing, Pat?" Eliza asked, her voice wary. "He's got maybe 3-4 hours on us," Jed said, not looking at her. "He's riding a spooked horse, and he's scared. He'll ride sloppy. He'll push too hard, and his horse will founder before dawn. You're going after him." Jed corrected. He turned, the full sack in his hand. His eyes were chips of flint. "We are going after him." Eliza's heart leaped. "Run. You want us to run?" "No, girl," Jed said, his voice a low growl. "I taught you better than that. We're not running. We're hunting. That boy, he'll ride back to the rest of the pack. He'll tell them what happened here. He'll tell them there's only 2 of us, and they will come. They will come for us, Eliza, with fire and rope. We can't wait for that. We go to them." The idea was madness. 2 of them against the rest of the Red Scorpions. A dozen men, maybe more. But as she looked at her father's face, she saw no madness. She saw only cold, hard logic. It was the logic of the wolf, who stalks the wounded buffalo rather than waiting for the herd to trample him. "We find the boy," Jed continued, "and he'll lead us to their camp. We finish this. We finish it before it finishes us." Eliza stood, ignoring the fire in her ribs. The pain was a distant signal, a fire bell ringing in a town miles away. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the cold, hard ember of rage that was beginning to glow in her belly, a fire that matched her father's. "He rode east," she said, "towards the Cimarron." "I know," Jed said. He tossed her boots from the corner. "Put 'em on. Get your coat. It'll be cold for dawn." They worked in tandem, a grim, silent partnership. Jed saddled his own mare Bess, and Eliza's hardy buckskin gelding, Apollo. They packed the food and ammunition. Jed took his rifle. He handed Eliza the shotgun, which he'd retrieved from the house, and his own Navy revolver. "You're handier with the scattergun," he said. "Save the pistol." They didn't look back at the house. They didn't look at the bodies. There was nothing for them here anymore but ghosts and blood. The homestead was a tomb. Jed mounted Bess, and Eliza, with a painful grunt, pulled herself into Apollo's saddle. The 2 horses, sensing the urgency, shuffled nervously, their breath pluming in the dark. The moon was a cold, silver sliver, offering just enough light to see the endless, rolling sea of prairie grass before them. "Pa," Eliza said, her voice quiet. He turned to her. In the starlight, she looked like a warrior queen, her face pale and stark, her eyes dark pits of resolve. I'm scared," she confessed. Jedediah Stone reached across the small space between them and laid his scarred hand on her arm. His touch was firm, grounding. "Good," he said. "Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it ride you. You ride it. You ride it straight into hell if you have to.